The moment my mother Grace swung that champagne bottle at my head, I remember thinking how the crystal chandelier's light caught the green glass, making it sparkle like an emerald. It was beautiful, really, in that split second before everything went black. All because I wouldn't sign over my Seattle waterfront condo to my brother Marcus for his, quote, fresh start, unquote. The condo I'd worked 14-hour days for 3 years straight to afford. The one my parents now demanded I gift to their golden child who couldn't hold down a job for more than 6 months. Growing up as the eldest child in the Mitchell family of Bellevue, Washington, I learned early that love came with conditions. While Marcus got praised for managing C's in high school, my straight A's were met with, "You can do better." When I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Washington with a computer science degree, my parents spent the entire ceremony talking about Marcus's potential once he found his passion. By 25, I'd landed a software engineering position at a major tech company downtown Seattle. The work was demanding but rewarding. I'd leave my Capitol Hill apartment at 6 in the morning and rarely returned before 8 at night. Weekends meant more coding, more projects, more proving myself in a male-dominated field. My social life consisted of quick coffee breaks with colleagues and the occasional Friday night video call with my college roommate who'd moved to Boston. Marcus, meanwhile, had dropped out of 3 different colleges. First, it was business administration because the professors didn't understand his vision. Then psychology, because the coursework was beneath his intellectual capacity. Finally, art history, which he abandoned after discovering museums expected him to start at entry-level positions. Each failure came with parents' reassurances that he just hadn't found his calling yet. The pattern continued through his 20s, a surf shop that went under after 4 months, a food truck that never got proper permits, a cryptocurrency consulting firm that consisted of him giving terrible investment advice from our parents' basement. Each venture funded by Grace and Harold Mitchell, who seemed to have endless faith and resources for their baby boy. I saved every penny during those years. No vacations to Hawaii like my coworkers, no designer handbags or weekend spa trips. I drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic and brought lunch from home every single day. My studio apartment was furnished with thrift store finds and hand-me-downs. Every bonus, every tax refund, every spare dollar went into my house fund. The day I closed on my waterfront condo in West Seattle remains the proudest moment of my life. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, a kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. I stood on my balcony that first evening watching the ferry boats cross the Sound and felt like I'd finally made it. The American dream achieved through nothing but determination and sacrifice. 2 weeks before Marcus's engagement party, my parents showed up unannounced. This wasn't unusual. They had a key I'd given them for emergencies, though their definition of emergency seemed to include being in the neighborhood and wanting to critique my lifestyle choices. "Bernadette, darling," Grace said, running her finger along my bookshelf as if checking for dust. "This place is far too big for just one person." Harold nodded from where he'd planted himself on my couch. "Your brother's been having a tough time lately. That apartment situation was completely unfair." The apartment situation, as they called it, was Marcus being evicted for the 5th time. This round because he'd turned his unit into an illegal Airbnb while owing 4 months of back rent. Maybe he could stay here for a while? Grace suggested, not really suggesting at all. "Family helps family." "He has a bedroom at your house," I reminded them. "The same one he's had since middle school." "A 32-year-old man can't bring a woman home to his parents' house," Harold said. "Speaking of which, did you hear he's engaged?" This was news to me. Last I'd heard, Marcus was dating a bartender named Ashley. Or was it the yoga instructor Brittany Hard to keep track when he went through relationships like expired milk? "Her name's Stephanie," Grace beamed. "Lovely girl, very accomplished. She's in the legal field." I managed not to roll my eyes. In the legal field probably meant she was a receptionist at a law firm. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but my parents had a way of inflating Marcus's achievements and associations. "That's wonderful," I said. "When's the wedding?" "They haven't set a date yet," Grace admitted. But the engagement party is in 2 weeks. You'll come, of course. It wasn't a question. Nothing with my parents ever was. After they left, I went through my mail sorting bills from junk. A thick envelope from the Seattle Department of Records caught my attention. Strange, I hadn't requested any documents. Inside was a copy of my property deed. But something was wrong. Where my name should have appeared alone, it now read, Bernadette Mitchell and Marcus Mitchell as joint tenants with right of survivorship. My hands shook as I read it again and again. This had to be a mistake. Marcus's name couldn't be on my condo deed. I'd never agreed to that. I'd never even discussed it. But there it was, dated 3 years ago, right after I'd closed on the property. The signature next to Marcus's name looked like mine, but I knew I'd never signed such a document. The witnessing notary's name was smudged, conveniently illegible. My mind raced back 3 years. The closing had been in March. In April, I'd had my appendix removed, emergency surgery that kept me hospitalized for a week due to complications. My parents had handled my mail and bills while I recovered. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. They'd forged my signature. They'd put Marcus on my deed while I was lying in a hospital bed, trusting them to take care of things. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Can't wait to see you at my party, sis. We need to talk about your living situation." My living situation, in my own home, that I'd paid for with my own money. I set down the phone and stared at the forged document. The brother I'd protected and excused all my life had conspired with our parents to steal half my home. The only question now was whether they'd settle for half or if they wanted it all. Saturday arrived with unusual sunshine for Seattle in October. I spent the morning at my lawyer friend Jennifer's Queen Anne office, spreading out the documents across her mahogany desk. Jennifer Chen had been my study partner through undergraduate, one of the few people who understood working twice as hard for half the recognition. "This is sophisticated forgery," she said, examining the deed through a magnifying glass. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The notary's seal is almost perfect." Almost. "Look here." She pointed to tiny inconsistencies in the embossing. "Real notary seals have specific depth patterns. This is good, but it's not authentic. The question is proving it 3 years after the fact." I showed her the timeline I'd constructed, my hospitalization, parents having access to my apartment, the mysterious appearance of Marcus's name on the deed during that exact week. "We can challenge this," Jennifer said, "but it'll be messy. Your parents will claim you agreed to it verbally. Marcus will say it was always the plan. Without concrete evidence of the forgery—" "What about the notary?" I asked. "Can't we track them down?" "I'm already searching. But if they were smart, they used someone who's since died or left the state." She leaned back in her chair. "Bernadette, is it possible Marcus is being manipulated too? Maybe he doesn't know the signature was forged." I wanted to believe that. Despite everything, some part of me still saw Marcus as my little brother, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But then I remembered his text about my living situation. "He knows," I said quietly. "He's always known." The engagement party was set for 4 o'clock at my parents' Bellevue estate, the same house where I'd grown up feeling like a guest who needed to earn her keep. I dressed carefully in a navy sheath dress, professional but not trying too hard. Pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, the only family member who'd ever seen me for who I was. The circular driveway was already packed with luxury cars when I arrived at 3:45. Grace had outdone herself with the decorations, white and gold balloons clustered around the entrance. A banner reading, "Congratulations, Marcus and Stephanie," stretched across the portico. Through the windows, I could see catering staff circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage. Jennifer had advised me to act normal, not tip my hand about discovering the forgery until we had more evidence. But normal felt impossible when I knew what they'd done. Inside the house buzzed with conversation. About 70 guests mingled through the formal living room and out onto the covered patio. I recognized several of my parents' country club friends, Harold's business associates, and what looked like Marcus's entire current friend group. Bernadette. Grace materialized at my elbow, air-kissing my cheek. She wore winter-white Chanel, her blonde hair freshly highlighted. "Don't you look professional? Come, you must meet Stephanie." She guided me through the crowd with the efficiency of a border collie herding sheep. I caught glimpses of Marcus holding court near the bar, gesticulating wildly about some new business venture. Same song, different verse. Stephanie stood near the French doors leading to the garden, and my first thought was that she didn't match Marcus's usual type at all. Where he typically went for flashy and high maintenance, Stephanie was understated elegance. Sleek black hair in a low bun, minimal makeup, a gray dress that whispered rather than shouted expense. She was speaking intently into her phone. "The property transfer documents need to be filed by Monday," I heard her say. "No, the sister hasn't agreed yet, but that's being handled." She noticed our approach and ended the call smoothly. "Mrs. Mitchell, this must be Bernadette." The famous sister, Stephanie, extended a manicured hand. Her handshake was firm, professional. "Marcus talks about you constantly." "All good things, I hope," I managed. Something flickered in her eyes. "Oh, absolutely, especially about your gorgeous condo. Water views, right? Those are getting harder to find in Seattle." The hair on my neck stood up. Yes, I was lucky to find it. "Luck has nothing to do with it," Grace interjected. "Bernadette works like a dog for that company, 60, 70 hours a week, no life outside of coding." "I enjoy my work," I said evenly. "Still," Stephanie smiled, "must be nice to have all that space to yourself. Marcus mentioned it's 2 bedrooms perfect for when situations change." Before I could respond, she excused herself to rejoin her phone call, walking toward the study. I watched her go mind racing. Legal field, indeed. Everything about her screamed paralegal or legal assistant, the kind who knew exactly how property documents worked. "Let me introduce you to the Weatherbys," Grace said, already pulling me toward another group. "Their daughter just got divorced. Maybe you two can bond over being single career women." I endured 20 minutes of small talk before extracting myself to find a bathroom. But instead of heading to the powder room, I found myself outside Harold's study. The door was slightly ajar, Stephanie's voice carrying clearly. "Yes, I understand the sister might contest it," she was saying, "but the statute of limitations works in our favor. 3 years is a long time. No, she has no idea I helped with the documents. Marcus says she's too trusting for her own good." My blood turned to ice. I pressed closer to the door. "The parents want it done quietly. Public pressure at this party, then she'll cave. Marcus gets the condo, sells it, and we have our nest egg. Yes, I know it's worth at least $680,000 in this market. My fee remains 10% as discussed." Footsteps approached from inside. I quickly moved down the hall, ducking into the actual powder room just as the study door opened fully. Through the crack under the bathroom door, I saw Stephanie's designer heels pause, then continue toward the party. I gripped the marble countertop, staring at my reflection. They'd planned everything. The engagement, the party, the public pressure. Stephanie wasn't some innocent woman who'd fallen for Marcus's charms. She was a co-conspirator, brought in specifically for her legal knowledge. A knock on the door made me jump. "Bernadette, you in there." Marcus's voice, the same one that used to beg me to check for monsters under his bed. "Mom says it's time for toasts." "Be right out," I called, proud that my voice didn't shake. When I emerged, Marcus was leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets. At 32, he still had the boyish looks that got him out of trouble all our lives. Sandy hair that flopped over his forehead, green eyes that sparkled with mischief, the Mitchell family dimples that skipped me entirely. "Good to see you, Bernie," he said, using my childhood nickname. "Been too long." "Has it?" I kept my tone neutral. "Seems like I just saw you last month when you needed to borrow $2,000. He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "About that. Things are turning around now. Stephanie and I have big plans." "I'm sure you do." His expression shifted, becoming more calculating. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. The condo situation." "What condo situation?" I asked innocently. "Come on, Bernie. You know, Mom and Dad put my name on the deed years ago, for tax purposes, they said. But now with the wedding coming up, Stephanie and I need a real place. The casual admission of what they'd done stopped me cold. He wasn't even pretending it had been legitimate. Marcus, I said slowly, my name is on that deed because I paid for that condo. Every penny. You contributed nothing. That's not how family works, he said, the charm dropping from his voice. Besides, it's perfectly legal. I'm half owner whether you like it or not. We'll see about that. His eyes narrowed. Don't make this difficult, Bernie. You know how Mom gets when she's upset. Just play nice, agree to sell, and everybody wins. Everybody but me, you mean? You can afford another place. Hell, you probably have enough saved for 2 condos by now. Some of us aren't robots who live for work. Before I could respond, Grace's voice echoed through the house. Everyone gather round for toasts. Marcus smirked. Showtime, sister. Try not to embarrass the family. He sauntered back to the party, leaving me alone in the hallway with the growing certainty that this wasn't just about money or property. This was about finally putting me in what they'd always considered my place, beneath Marcus, serving his needs, existing only to enable his success. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd taught me to be strong, thinking they were teaching me to be servile. All those years of working twice as hard, of proving myself again and again, of building my life without their help or approval, they'd forged someone who wouldn't break under pressure. I straightened my dress, lifted my chin, and walked back to the party. Whatever they had planned, I was ready. The living room had been rearranged to create a makeshift stage area near the fireplace. Guests formed a semicircle, champagne flutes in hand, while Marcus and Stephanie stood front and center. The catering staff circulated with bottles of Dom Perignon, ensuring everyone's glass stayed full. Grace clinked her crystal flute with a silver spoon, the sound cutting through conversations. Thank you all for joining us on this wonderful occasion. She looked radiant in the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows, every inch the Bellevue Society matron. Harold stood beside her chest, puffed with pride, his gray suit impeccable as always. They'd positioned themselves slightly apart from Marcus and Stephanie, making it clear who was running this show. Harold and I have been blessed with 2 children. Grace began, her voice carrying the practiced modulation of someone used to public speaking. Our son Marcus, brilliant and creative, a true entrepreneur with vision beyond his years. I noticed several guests exchange glances. Most of them had probably lent Marcus money at some point, never to see it again. And our daughter, Bernadette. Grace continued, her tone cooling noticeably. So dedicated to her career, so independent. The pause before independent stretched just long enough to make it sound like an insult. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd. But today is about Marcus and his beautiful bride-to-be, Stephanie. Grace raised her glass higher. 2 souls who found each other at just the right moment. When Marcus told us he'd met someone special, we knew she had to be extraordinary to capture our boy's heart. Stephanie smiled demurely, playing her part perfectly. Her left hand rested on Marcus's arm, the engagement ring catching the light. I wondered if that ring had been purchased with the $2,000 he'd borrowed from me. Family is everything to the Mitchells. Harold picked up where Grace left off. His voice boomed with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. We've always taught our children that blood comes first, that supporting each other isn't just an option, it's an obligation. My stomach tightened. Here it comes. Which is why, Harold continued, making direct eye contact with me, we know Bernadette will do the right thing when it comes to helping Marcus and Stephanie start their new life together. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Those who knew our family dynamics leaned forward, slightly sensing drama. Those who didn't looked confused, but intrigued. After all, Grace added sweetly, what good is success if you don't share it with family? Bernadette's been so fortunate with her career. That waterfront condo she barely has time to enjoy. Such a waste for one person. Don't you think? My face burned as 70 pairs of eyes swiveled toward me. Some sympathetic, most simply curious to see what would happen next. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, every reaction being cataloged and judged. Marcus cleared his throat, stepping forward. Actually, Mom, Dad, Stephanie, and I have been discussing this. We don't want to put Bernie in an awkward position. For a brief moment, I felt hope. Maybe Marcus had developed a conscience. Maybe Stephanie had talked sense into him. Which is why, he continued, we think the best solution is to sell the condo and split the proceeds. That way, Bernie can downsize to something more appropriate for a single woman, and Stephanie and I can put our half toward a family home. Our half. As if he'd contributed anything beyond fraud and forgery. That's very generous of you, darling. Grace beamed at Marcus, then turned her laser focus on me. Bernadette, don't you have something to say to your brother's thoughtful proposal? Every eye in the room locked onto me. The silence stretched like taffy, sticky and suffocating. I could feel my parents' expectation pressing down like a physical weight. Say yes, agree. Don't make a scene. Be the good daughter we trained you to be. I set down my champagne flute on the nearest table, the crystal ringing softly against marble. When I spoke, I kept my voice calm and clear. No. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Grace's smile froze, becoming something sharp and dangerous. I'm sorry, she said, though she'd clearly heard me. I said no. I will not be selling my condo. I will not be giving Marcus any proceeds from a sale. The property is mine, purchased with my money, and it will remain mine. But Marcus's name is on the deed, Harold said, his jovial mask slipping. Has been for years. You can't just ignore that. A deed that was fraudulently altered while I was in the hospital, I replied evenly, without my knowledge or consent, which I believe is called forgery. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone whispered, did she just accuse them of forgery? Another voice muttered, I knew something was off about this family. Marcus stepped forward, his face flushing red. How dare you stand there and lie? You agreed to put me on the deed. You said family helps family. When, I challenged, when exactly did I agree to give you half ownership of my largest asset? Name the date, the place. Who witnessed this conversation? You were probably drunk. Stephanie interjected, earning shocked looks for her sudden venom. Marcus told me how you can't handle your liquor. You probably don't even remember agreeing. Interesting theory from someone I met 30 minutes ago. I shot back. Tell me, Stephanie, how long have you worked as a paralegal? Is that where you learned about property transfers? Maybe even how to forge documents? Her face went white, then red. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. My signature was forged, my property was stolen, and I will be pursuing legal action against everyone involved. You ungrateful little bitch! Grace snarled, her society mask finally cracking completely. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I asked, genuinely curious. Ignored my achievements, funneled my college fund to Marcus's failed businesses, made me feel like an outsider in my own family. We fed you, we clothed you, we gave you a roof over your head. The legal minimum required of parents. Congratulations on not going to jail for child neglect. The crowd was backing away now, forming a wider circle as if violence might break out, which, given Grace's expression, wasn't impossible. You were nothing when we took you in, Grace hissed, advancing on me. A nobody, a charity case, and this is how you repay us. Took me in. I frowned. What are you talking about? I'm your daughter. Something flickered across Harold's face. Fear, guilt. He reached for Grace's arm, but she shook him off. You want to talk about truth? Grace laughed high and sharp. Let's talk about truth. You're not our real daughter, never were. Just a burden we took on, and look how you've turned out. Selfish, cold, unlovable. The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair, trying to process what she'd just said. Adopted, I was adopted. In 32 years, they'd never said a word. Grace, Harold warned, this isn't the time. No, it's exactly the time. She grabbed a champagne bottle from a passing server's tray. She wants to destroy our family. She wants to humiliate us. Let her know exactly what she is. Nothing. Nobody. Not real family. Mom, Marcus said uncertainly, maybe we should calm down. Don't you defend her. Grace rounded on him, then back to me. You think you're so special with your condo and your career? You're nothing but an ungrateful orphan who forgot her place. But I'll remind you. She raised the bottle high and time seemed to slow. I saw Harold lunge forward too late, heard Marcus shout something unintelligible, watched Stephanie pull out her phone, probably already calculating the legal ramifications. But mostly, I watched the bottle arc through the air, green glass catching the light from the chandelier above. Beautiful and terrible like everything in this house had always been. The last thing I remember was the sound. Not the impact itself, but the gasps from 70 guests as Dom Perignon met skull as champagne mixed with blood, as the ungrateful orphan finally learned her place on my parents' imported Italian marble floor. Then darkness. Blessed, peaceful darkness where Grace Mitchell's voice couldn't reach me anymore. The first thing I became aware of was the beeping, steady, rhythmic electronic. The kind of sound that meant machines were keeping track of something important. The second was the pain, a throbbing ache that radiated from the left side of my head, down through my neck and shoulders. I tried to open my eyes, but they felt weighted down like someone had placed coins on the lids. My throat was desert dry, and when I attempted to speak, only a rasp emerged. "She's waking up," a woman's voice said. "Page Dr. Rodriguez." Cool fingers pressed against my wrist, checking my pulse. I managed to crack one eye open, immediately squinting against the fluorescent brightness. A nurse in seafoam green scrubs smiled down at me. "Welcome back, Miss Mitchell. You've been quite the sleepyhead." "How?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "How long?" 3 days, she said, adjusting something on the IV stand beside my bed. "You had us worried for a while there. That was quite a knock to the head." 3 days. I'd been unconscious for 3 days. Memories flooded back in nauseating waves. The party, the confrontation, Grace calling me an orphan, the bottle swinging toward my head. "My family," I croaked. "Are they—" The nurse's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let's focus on you right now. Dr. Rodriguez will be here soon to check you over." She busied herself with the monitors, but I caught her glancing toward the door. Something was wrong. Beyond the obvious fact that my mother had tried to brain me with champagne. Dr. Rodriguez arrived within minutes, a compact woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She performed a series of neurological tests, having me follow her finger with my eyes, squeeze her hands, push against resistance. "You're very lucky," she said finally. The CT scan showed a linear skull fracture but no bleeding in the brain. "You have a severe concussion and will need to monitor you for a few more days, but you should make a full recovery." "Lucky," I repeated. My mother hit me with a bottle. Dr. Rodriguez exchanged glances with the nurse. "About that, there's a detective who's been waiting to speak with you. Are you feeling up to it?" I nodded, immediately regretting it as pain lanced through my skull. "Take it easy," the doctor advised. "No sudden movements for a while. I'll send him in, but if you get tired or overwhelmed, just tell Nurse Patterson." Detective Martinez looked like he'd stepped out of a crime procedural. Late 30s athletic build with observant dark eyes that probably missed nothing. He pulled a chair close to my bed, keeping his voice low and calm. "Miss Mitchell, I'm Detective Ray Martinez with the Bellevue Police Department. How are you feeling?" "Like my mother tried to kill me," I said bluntly. "Because she did." He pulled out a small notebook. "That's what we need to discuss. Can you tell me what you remember about the incident?" I walked him through everything. The forged deed, the confrontation at the party, Grace's revelation about my adoption, the bottle swinging toward my head. He took notes without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification. "Your parents' version is quite different," he said when I finished. "They claim you'd been drinking heavily, that you became belligerent and aggressive. They say you tripped and fell, hitting your head on a table." "There were 70 witnesses," I protested. most of whom were your parents' friends, and several of them support their version of events. He leaned forward. But not all of them. And more importantly, we have this. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video, shaky footage from someone's cell phone, but clear enough. Grace raising the bottle, me standing perfectly still, not drunk, not aggressive. The swing, the impact, my body crumpling. Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, took this. She came forward yesterday, said she couldn't stay silent knowing what really happened. Mrs. Chen. Quiet elderly Mrs. Chen, who lived 3 houses down and grew the most beautiful roses. I'd helped her set up her computer last year. Is that enough, I asked, for charges? Assault with a deadly weapon, absolutely. But there's more. Martinez pocketed his phone. We've been looking into your claims about the deed forgery. Turns out the notary whose name appears on the document died 5 years ago, 2 years before your condo purchase. My heart raced, making the monitors beep faster. So it's definitely forged. Appears to be. We're bringing in document experts to confirm. He studied me carefully. Miss Mitchell, is there anything else you can tell me about your family? Any other incidents we should know about? I thought about 32 years of feeling like an outsider, of watching Marcus get praised for breathing while I worked myself to exhaustion for scraps of approval, of Grace's calculating eyes and Harold's booming dismissals. I just found out I'm adopted, I said quietly. At the party in front of everyone. They never told me. Martinez made another note. We'll look into that as well. In the meantime, I've placed a protective order preventing your family from contacting you or coming near the hospital. Do you have somewhere safe to stay when you're released? My condo, I said, then remembered. If I still own it by then. Given the evidence of forgery, I doubt any court would uphold their claim. He stood leaving a business card on my bedside table. Rest up. We'll need a formal statement when you're feeling better. And Miss Mitchell, you did the right thing standing up to them. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After he left, I lay staring at the ceiling tiles, trying to process everything. Adopted. The word kept echoing in my head. It explained so much, yet opened up entirely new questions. Who were my birth parents? Why had the Mitchells adopted me if they clearly didn't want me? What else had they lied about? Nurse Patterson returned to check my vitals. You have a visitor, she said. A young woman says she's your best friend. Diane. Should I send her in? You can say no if you're not ready. Please, yes. Diane burst through the door moments later, her usually perfect corporate appearance disheveled. Her eyes were red-rimmed and she clutched a familiar laptop bag. Bernie, oh my God, I've been so worried. She stopped just short of hugging me, clearly afraid of causing more damage. When I heard what happened, that video is all over social media. Your mother is a psychopath. You saw it. Everyone's seen it. Someone leaked it yesterday and it went viral. Bellevue Society woman assaults daughter over property dispute. The comments are brutal. She pulled a chair close. How are you really? Confused, hurt, angry. I shifted carefully, trying to find a position that didn't make my head throb. Did you know I was adopted? Diane's face went through several expressions before settling on guilty. I suspected. Remember in college when you needed your birth certificate for that internship, your parents took forever to produce it, and when they did, some of the dates seemed weird. But I figured if it was true, you knew and just didn't want to talk about it. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. What else did everyone know except me? Oh, Bernie. Diane carefully took my hand. Nothing else, I swear. But I brought your laptop. I thought you might want to check your accounts. Make sure your parents haven't tried anything else while you've been here. Smart, wonderful Diane. I'd given her my passwords years ago for emergencies. We booted up the laptop and I logged into my bank accounts with shaking fingers. Everything looked normal at first. Then I checked my credit report. 3 new credit cards opened in my name within the last 48 hours, all maxed out. Those bastards, Diane breathed. They're trying to destroy your credit. Print everything I told her. Every transaction, every application. Add it to the evidence pile. As Diane worked, I noticed an email from Jennifer, my lawyer friend. The subject line made my blood run cold. Urgent life insurance discovery. I clicked it open, reading with growing horror. Jennifer had done some digging after our meeting. She'd found a $2 million life insurance policy taken out on me 6 months ago. The beneficiary, Marcus Mitchell. The policy application included a medical exam I'd never taken, answers to health questions I'd never provided, and another forged signature. The premium payments came from an account I didn't recognize. "Diane," I said quietly, "they weren't just trying to steal my condo." She read over my shoulder, her face paling. "Bernie, this is conspiracy to commit murder. They took out insurance and then tried to kill you." The monitors started beeping more insistently as my heart rate spiked. Nurse Patterson rushed in, took one look at my face, and immediately called for Dr. Rodriguez. "What's wrong?" the doctor asked, checking my pupils. "Are you in pain?" I could barely get the words out. "My parents took out life insurance on me. Then my mother hit me with a bottle." Dr. Rodriguez and Nurse Patterson exchanged shocked looks. "We need to notify Detective Martinez immediately," the doctor said, "and I'm adding extra security to your room." As the medical staff bustled around, upgrading my security and calling the police, I stared at the email. 6 months ago. They'd been planning this for 6 months. Every family dinner, every stilted phone call, every interaction where they'd pretended to care, they'd been planning my death. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was as weak as they'd always told me I was. They'd thought one blow would be enough to kill the unwanted orphan who'd never quite fit into their perfect family picture. They were wrong. I was still here, still breathing, and now I knew exactly what they were. The question was, what else were they hiding? And more importantly, what would they try next when they realized I'd survived? My best friend, Diane, had always been the organized one. While other college students partied, she color-coded her notes and maintained spreadsheets for everything. That attention to detail served us well now as she set up a makeshift investigation center in my hospital room. "Okay," she said, arranging papers across the rolling tray table. "Let's trace this chronologically. The insurance policy was taken out 6 months ago in April. What happened around that time?" I thought back through the fog of pain medication. That's when Marcus announced his last business failure, the food truck. He owed $40,000 to investors. 40,000. Diane whistled low. Where did he even find investors? Dad's golf buddies, mostly. People who could afford to lose it but would definitely remember. I shifted against the pillows, wincing as the movement sent fresh spikes through my skull. Grace was furious, not about the money, but about the embarrassment. Diane typed notes into my laptop. "So they needed money fast, and suddenly you have a $2 million policy on your life. Check the insurance company," I suggested. "See if there's any connection to Stephanie." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. After a few minutes, her eyes widened. "Bernie, you're not going to believe this. The insurance agent who processed the policy, Robert Kellman, and guess who works at his office as a paralegal? Stephanie." "Bingo. Hired just 2 months before your policy was issued." Diane screenshot everything. This wasn't a crime of passion. They brought in a specialist. A knock interrupted us. Detective Martinez entered, followed by a woman in a severe black suit who introduced herself as Assistant District Attorney Sarah Winters. "Miss Mitchell." Ada Winters said, "I've been assigned to your case. The evidence Detective Martinez has gathered is compelling, but I need to ask you some difficult questions." I nodded, bracing myself. "Have you ever given your parents or brother permission to handle your financial affairs?" "Never. I've been financially independent since college." "What about during your hospitalization 3 years ago? Did you sign any power of attorney documents?" "No, I was conscious before surgery and after. Any documents would have required my signature." She made notes on her tablet. "We pulled the records from that insurance company. The medical exam was performed by a Dr. Patricia Morse. Ring any bells?" I shook my head, immediately regretting the motion. Dr. Morse lost her license 2 years ago, Martinez added, for falsifying medical documents. She's currently serving time for insurance fraud. So they used a corrupt doctor to fake my medical exam, I summarized. Stephanie's connections to process the paperwork. Then what? Wait for an opportunity? Or create one, ADA Winters said grimly. The policy has a 2-year contestability period. After that, it pays out regardless of circumstances. You were attacked at exactly 6 months and 1 week. The room felt suddenly colder. They'd been watching the calendar counting down to when they could kill me and collect $2 million. Diane's laptop dinged with a new email. Jennifer's sent more information, she said, scanning quickly. Oh my God, Bernie, she found 2 other policies. My stomach dropped. What? Smaller amounts, $500,000 each. One with your parents as beneficiaries, one with Marcus. Diane's voice shook. All different companies, all filed within the same month. They spread it around to avoid suspicion. $3 million total, Detective Martinez calculated. That's serious money. Enough to solve all their financial problems, I said quietly. Pay off Marcus's debts, maintain their lifestyle fund, whatever new scheme he dreamed up. Miss Mitchell. Ada Winters leaned forward. I need to ask about your adoption. Your parents revealed this at the party. In front of 70 people. Called me an ungrateful orphan, said I wasn't real family. Do you have any documentation about your adoption? I didn't even know I was adopted until 3 days ago. She exchanged glances with Martinez. We've been investigating that angle. There's no record of a legal adoption in Washington state matching your details. The beeping monitors reflected my racing heart. What does that mean? Several possibilities, Martinez said carefully. Private adoption that wasn't properly recorded. Out-of-state adoption, or it wasn't a legal adoption at all. The implications hung heavy in the sterile air. If my adoption wasn't legal, then who was I? Where had I come from? And why had the Mitchells taken me in? We're subpoenaing all family records, Ada Winters assured me. Bank statements, correspondence, everything. If there are answers, we'll find them. After they left, Diane helped me work through the cybersecurity implications. We changed every password-enabled 2-factor authentication on all accounts and froze my credit. She even set up alerts for any new accounts or inquiries. There's something else, she said hesitantly. While you were unconscious, someone tried to access your work computer remotely. It caught it and locked everything down but Bernie. They were trying to delete your project files. My current project was a security protocol worth millions to my company. If it disappeared, so would my job and my reputation in the industry. They're not just trying to kill me, I realized. They're trying to erase me completely, make it look like I had a breakdown, destroyed my own life. Well, they failed, Diane said fiercely. You're alive, you're fighting back, and they're the ones whose lives are about to implode. That evening alone, except for the security guard outside my door, I lay awake thinking. Every memory of childhood took on new shadows. Why had I been the only one required to do chores? Why did family photos always seem to position me slightly apart? Why did Grace insist on different standards for me and Marcus? My phone, which Diane had rescued from the party, vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. You should have just given him the condo. This didn't have to happen. There's still time to make it right. Drop the charges sign over the property and everyone can move on. You were never meant to be part of this family anyway. No signature, but I recognized the tone. Grace had always been expert at making threats sound like reasonable suggestions. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Detective Martinez. Then I typed back a single word, no. The response came quickly. You have no idea what we're capable of. Foster kids disappear all the time. Foster kid, is that what I'd been? The revelation sent fresh waves of nausea through me. I screenshotted this too, then blocked the number. But I couldn't block the questions. If I was a foster child, where was my real family? Why had no one looked for me? And what had the Mitchells gained by taking in an unwanted child only to treat her like an indentured servant? My hospital room door opened slightly. I tensed, then relaxed as Nurse Patterson entered for night rounds. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently, checking my IV. Too many thoughts. "Would you like something to help?" I almost said yes, then remembered what had happened the last time I was vulnerable in a hospital. "No, thank you. I need to stay alert." She patted my hand understandingly. "The guard's right outside. You're safe here." But I didn't feel safe. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like a target with a $3 million bullseye painted on my back. The Mitchells had spent 6 months planning my death. They wouldn't give up just because their first attempt had failed. Outside my window, Seattle's lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, my would-be killers were probably planning their next move. But I was planning too. Every document Diane had saved, every screenshot I'd taken, every piece of evidence we'd gathered was another nail in their coffin. They'd raised me to be quiet, compliant, grateful for scraps. They'd never expected me to fight back. That was their second crucial mistake. Their first was trying to kill someone who'd spent 32 years learning to survive without their love. Detective Martinez arrived the next morning with coffee and a thick folder that made my pulse quicken. His expression was grim as he settled into the visitor's chair. "Miss Mitchell, what I'm about to share might be disturbing. Are you prepared for that?" I pushed myself up straighter in the hospital bed, ignoring the residual dizziness. "After finding out my family planned to murder me for insurance money, I think I can handle whatever's in that folder." He opened it carefully, revealing photocopied documents and police reports. "Your mother, Grace Mitchell, has a sealed juvenile record. It took some doing to get access, but given the severity of the current charges..." "What did she do?" "When she was 16, she assaulted a neighbor with a baseball bat. The woman owned a vintage car that Grace wanted. When the neighbor refused to sell, Grace waited until dark and attacked her in her driveway." My blood chilled. Was the woman okay? Skull fracture, permanent hearing loss in one ear. Grace's parents were wealthy, good lawyers, got her probation and counseling. The records were sealed when she turned 18. "So she's done this before, attacked someone with a blunt object over property she wanted." "The pattern is concerning," Martinez agreed. "But that's not all. We've been investigating the insurance policies. Dr. Patricia Morse, the one who supposedly examined you, she's agreed to testify in exchange for reduced charges on her other cases. She'll admit the exam was fake. Better. She kept records of who paid her. Your father wrote personal checks for her services." He showed me photocopies. Harold's distinctive signature on 3 checks each for $5,000. He was careful with the amounts, I observed, under the reporting threshold. "You'd make a good detective." Martinez smiled slightly. "Now about your brother's spending, we pulled his financial records." The next set of documents made my accountant's heart race. Marcus's debt was staggering. Credit cards maxed out personal loans from shady lenders, even cash advances from casino markers in Las Vegas. $400,000 in total debt, Martinez summarized. "Most accumulated in the last year. He's been making minimum payments using money from your parents, but they've been struggling too." "Why, Dad's business was always successful." "Was. He made some bad investments, tried to recoup losses with riskier bets. Classic gambler's fallacy. They're leveraged to the hilt. The house is mortgaged 3 times over." Suddenly, so much made sense. The increasing pressure for me to help family, the desperate attempts to get my condo, the life insurance policies, they weren't just greedy, they were drowning. "There's one more thing," Martinez said, pulling out a final document. "We found Marcus's browser history. He'd been researching accidental death statistics, how long head injuries take to prove fatal, and whether security cameras could capture footage through windows. He was planning the specifics," I said, nausea rising. "Not just the money grab, but the actual murder. The search history goes back 8 months, before they took out the policies. This shows clear premeditation." A knock interrupted us. My attorney friend Jennifer entered, followed by a tall man in an expensive suit who radiated authority. Bernadette, this is David Brennan, Jennifer introduced. He's agreed to take your case. He specializes in complex fraud and attempted murder prosecutions. Brennan's handshake was firm despite my prone position. Miss Mitchell, I've reviewed the evidence. We have grounds for both criminal and civil action. The criminal case will be handled by the DA's office, but I'll ensure your interests are protected throughout. The civil case could result in significant damages. I don't want their money, I said. I want them stopped. Understandable. But consider this. Any financial judgment would prevent them from profiting from their crimes. And given what they've put you through, compensation is appropriate. Jennifer pulled up a chair. Bernie, there's something else. I've been digging into the adoption angle. There's no record of you in the foster system either. But Grace's text said I was a foster kid. I know, which means either the records were destroyed, filed under another name, or... She hesitated. Or you were never in the system at all. You might have been privately placed, possibly illegally. Brennan leaned forward. This is crucial. If your adoption was illegal, it could explain why they felt confident forging documents. They've been operating outside the law from the beginning. We need to find out where I really came from, I said quietly. I have an investigator looking into it, Brennan assured me. Birth records, missing children reports from 30 years ago, any Jane does that match. We'll find the truth. After they left, I spent the afternoon providing my formal statement to Martinez. Every detail, every remembered slight, every piece of evidence that my family had been planning this for months. By the time we finished, my head was pounding and my throat was raw. You did great, Martinez said, packing up his recorder. One more thing. Stephanie Huang, your brother's fiancée, she's vanished. Cleared out her apartment the night of the party, quit her job via email. We have a bolo out, but she's in the wind. She knew it was going bad, I said. Probably had an exit strategy from the beginning. Smart woman. Too bad she used her intelligence for crime. He paused at the door. We're arresting your parents tomorrow morning. Wanted to give you advance notice. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Grace's juvenile assault. The pattern was so clear in hindsight. Find someone who has what you want. Try to take it through manipulation. When that fails, resort to violence. Then use money and connections to escape consequences. Except this time, there was video. There were witnesses brave enough to speak up. There was a detective who cared more about justice than politics. And there was me still breathing despite their best efforts. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, the message was from Harold. Bernadette, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mother was drinking, emotions were high. Surely we can work this out as a family. I've transferred $50,000 to your account as an apology. Let's put this behind us. I checked my banking app. Sure enough, there was a pending transfer. Blood money to buy my silence. I screenshot everything and declined the transfer. Then I typed back, I want the truth about my adoption, all of it. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, you wouldn't believe us anyway. Try me. Ask your Aunt Martha about her friend Louise, but remember, some doors are better left closed. Aunt Martha, Grace's sister who lived in Portland, who never visited, who sent generic Christmas cards with no personal message. I'd met her maybe 5 times in my entire life. I added her name to my growing list of people to contact. The Mitchells had kept me in the dark for 32 years, but secrets like head wounds have a way of eventually coming to light. Tomorrow they'd be arrested. Their mugshots would be in the papers, their reputations destroyed, their schemes exposed. It was justice, but it didn't feel like victory. How could it when the price was discovering that the only family I'd ever known had spent months planning my murder? But as I drifted off to sleep, one thought gave me comfort. I wasn't the helpless orphan they'd painted me as. I was a survivor, and I was just getting started. The call came at 7 in the morning, jarring me from medication-induced sleep. An unfamiliar number with a Portland area code. My hand trembled as I answered. Bernadette. The voice was elderly, hesitant. This is Martha Whelan, your Grace's sister. I heard about what happened. I pushed myself upright, instantly alert. Aunt Martha, Dad Harold mentioned I should ask you about someone named Louise. Silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then a heavy sigh. I knew this day would come. I told Grace 30 years ago that lies have a way of surfacing. Can I visit you? This isn't a conversation for the phone. I'm still in the hospital, but yes, please come. I'll catch the noon train. Bernadette. I'm sorry for all of it. She hung up before I could ask what she meant. My breakfast sat untouched as I wondered what secrets were about to spill from my family's carefully constructed facade. Jennifer arrived at 10 with a box of documents and a grim expression. Bernie, we found something. My investigator pulled birth certificates from Washington and Oregon from 32 to 34 years ago, looking for babies who disappeared from the system. And March 15th, 32 years ago, a baby girl named Emma Louise Thornton was born at Swedish Medical Center. Parents were David and Louise Thornton of Queen Anne. My heart stuttered. March 15th was my birthday, or at least the date I'd always celebrated. What happened to them? Jennifer's face darkened. Car accident when Emma was 2. Both parents killed instantly. The baby survived with minor injuries. That's terrible, but what does it have to do with me? Bernie David Thornton was heir to a timber fortune. Louise came from old Seattle money. Their daughter Emma stood to inherit approximately $5 million in trust funds. The room spun. I gripped the bed rails trying to process what Jennifer was implying. But Emma Thornton disappeared from the hospital after the accident. She continued. The official report says she was transferred to child services, but there's no record of her ever arriving. No foster placement, no adoption records. She simply vanished. You think I'm Emma Thornton? The timeline matches, the age matches, and Bernie... She pulled out a photograph. This is Louise Thornton. I stared at the photo of a woman with my exact bone structure, my distinctive chin, even the way one eyebrow arched slightly higher than the other. It was like looking at myself in vintage clothing. How did the Mitchells get me? That's what we need to find out. But if you are Emma Thornton, there's a trust fund worth approximately $30 million sitting in probate court. It's been accumulating interest for 30 years. 30 million. The number didn't feel real, but it explained why the Mitchells had been so desperate. If they knew who I really was, if they'd been stealing from my trust all these years. Detective Martinez arrived as Jennifer was leaving. His expression told me the morning had been eventful. Your parents were arrested at 6 a.m., he reported. Grace didn't go quietly. It took 3 officers to get her in the car. She kept screaming that you destroyed the family. And Harold went peacefully, almost seemed relieved. He asked to make a deal before we even got to the station. Martinez pulled out his tablet. He's willing to testify against Grace in exchange for lesser charges. He's throwing her under the bus. Completely. Claims she masterminded everything, that he was coerced. His lawyer's already filing motions. I thought about Harold always following Grace's lead, always deferring to her anger. Maybe he had been coerced, or maybe he was just a coward who'd found his exit strategy. And Marcus turned himself in an hour ago with his lawyer. He's also trying to make a deal. Seems being abandoned by Stephanie shook him. He brought boxes of documents with him, Bernie. Financial records going back years. My hospital room was beginning to feel like a detective's office when Martha arrived that afternoon. She looked older than her 70 years, gray hair pulled back severely, moving carefully with a walker. But her eyes were sharp, knowing. You look just like her, were her first words. Louise, I knew it the first time I saw you as a toddler, but Grace swore you were from a legitimate adoption agency. Please, I said, tell me everything. Martha settled into the chair with obvious pain. Louise Thornton was my best friend in college. We were roommates then, bridesmaids at each other's weddings. When she married David, Grace was consumed with jealousy. Louise had everything Grace wanted: wealth, status, a husband who adored her. So Grace knew my birth parents. Knew them, envied them, hated them for their happiness. Martha's voice turned bitter. When Louise had you, Emma, she asked me to be godmother. Grace was furious she wasn't chosen. Then the accident happened. Accident? Martha laughed harshly. That's what the police called it, but I never believed it. The Thorntons were careful drivers, and it happened on a clear night on a road they knew well. Their car went off the cliff at exactly the spot with no barriers. My blood turned to ice. You think Grace? I could never prove it, but 2 days after the funeral, Grace showed up with a toddler she claimed to have adopted. You. Same age as Emma. Same unusual birthmark on your shoulder. I unconsciously touched my left shoulder where a small star-shaped mark had always resided. I confronted her, Martha continued. She swore you were a different child, that the resemblance to Louise was coincidence, said she'd gone through proper channels, had paperwork, but she never showed it to me. Why didn't you go to the police? With what a suspicion Grace's husband's brother was a judge. They had connections everywhere, and you seemed happy enough as a little girl. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Tears tracked down her weathered face. I was a coward. I chose my sister over my best friend's daughter. The Thornton money, I said. Have they been stealing it? Harold had power of attorney for some of David's business interests. Small amounts at first, then more as you grew older. Always careful, always just under the radar. But it wasn't enough for Grace. She wanted it all. The pieces clicked together with sickening finality. They'd killed my parents, stolen me, raised me as their own while embezzling my inheritance. And when the money ran low, they decided to kill me too. There's proof, Martha said suddenly. Louise was paranoid after some break-ins at their home. She kept copies of all important documents in a safety deposit box at a bank in Portland, including DNA samples from the family in case anything happened. She gave me the key. You still have it. Martha pulled an envelope from her purse. I've carried it for 30 years, hoping I'd never need it. The bank has been notified to expect you. I took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an old-fashioned safety deposit key and a letter in faded ink. If something happens to us, take care of Emma. She's our whole world. Make sure she knows she was loved. It was signed Louise Thornton with a postscript, trust no one from David's business circle, especially not the Mitchells. She'd known. Somehow Louise had known the Mitchells were a threat. I'll testify, Martha said quietly, to everything. Grace destroyed so many lives. It's time for the truth. After she left, I sat holding the key and letter, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd learned. I wasn't Bernadette Mitchell, unwanted adopted daughter. I was Emma Thornton, stolen heiress, survivor of a family massacre. My phone rang. Brennan, my attorney. Bernadette, I just got off the phone with the federal prosecutor. Given what Harold Mitchell revealed, the FBI is taking over the case. This isn't just attempted murder anymore. It's murder, kidnapping, fraud spanning 3 decades. Murder, you mean my birth parents? Harold broke down completely. He's admitted they tampered with the Thorntons' car. Grace convinced him it would look like an accident, that they'd get custody of you and access to the money. He swears he didn't know she planned to kill them, thought it would just be property damage. He's lying. Probably. But he's given them enough to reopen the Thornton case as a homicide. Grace is looking at life in prison, maybe even the death penalty. I hung up and stared out the window at Seattle's skyline. Somewhere out there were the streets where my real parents had driven me as a baby, the parks where they'd pushed my stroller, the home where they'd loved me before Grace Mitchell's greed tore our family apart. Tomorrow I'd take a DNA test to confirm what everyone now knew. I'd go to Portland and open that safety deposit box. I'd reclaim not just my inheritance, but my identity. Emma Louise Thornton. The name felt foreign on my tongue, but it was mine. It had always been mine. And for the first time in 32 years, I was going to live it. David Brennan's law office occupied the entire 40th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise. 3 days after leaving the hospital, I sat in his conference room surrounded by bankers' boxes and legal documents. My head still ached if I moved too quickly, but I'd refused to delay this meeting. Emma. Brennan began, still adjusting to my real name. What I'm about to tell you is going to be shocking. We've uncovered evidence that your case is not unique. He pushed a folder across the mahogany table. Inside were photographs of 3 other young adults, all approximately my age. Michael Chen, Rebecca Valdez, and Jonathan Whitman, all allegedly adopted by wealthy families in the Pacific Northwest within 2 years of your placement with the Mitchells. All had birth parents who died in accidents shortly before the adoptions. All stood to inherit significant wealth. My hands trembled as I studied their faces. They're all like me, stolen children. We believe so. The FBI has connected at least 12 suspicious deaths to this adoption ring. Your parents, the Mitchells, weren't the masterminds. They were clients. Who was running it? A lawyer named Vincent Castellano. He specialized in private adoptions, had connections throughout child services. He'd identify wealthy families with young children, arrange accidents, then sell the orphans to desperate couples who wanted both children and access to money. Sell? The word tasted bitter. How much was I worth? Brennan hesitated. According to Harold's confession, they paid $200,000 for you, plus a percentage of any funds they could access from your trust. $200,000, the price of stealing a child, murdering her parents, erasing her identity. I pushed down the rage, threatening to overwhelm me. There would be time for anger later. Where is Castellano now? Dead. Heart attack 5 years ago, but his records survived. His secretary kept everything, apparently blackmailing clients for years. She's agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. And the other stolen children. Michael Chen discovered the truth last year when his adoptive mother had a deathbed confession. He's been fighting for his inheritance in California courts. Rebecca Valdez still doesn't know. Her adoptive parents have been model citizens, never touched her trust fund. Jonathan. Brennan paused. Jonathan died in a skiing accident at 18. His adoptive parents inherited everything. Another murder, probably. How many of us had they killed over the years? We want to file a class action lawsuit, Brennan continued. Not just criminal charges, but civil action against every family involved, every official who looked the other way, every institution that failed to protect you. Are you willing to be the lead plaintiff? Yes. No hesitation. These people had stolen not just money, but entire lives, identities, families. A knock interrupted us. Brennan's assistant entered with Detective Martinez and a woman in an FBI windbreaker. Ms. Thornton. The agent introduced herself as Special Agent Sarah Kim. We've been investigating the Mitchells' finances. You need to see this. She spread bank statements across the table. Dozens of accounts, some offshore, all showing regular deposits over 30 years. They've stolen approximately $15 million from your trust, Agent Kim explained. Small amounts carefully timed, always just under reporting thresholds. But there's more. These other accounts, they were stealing from charities, their own business partners, even their church building fund. How much total? $23 million that we've found so far. Grace Mitchell was a one-woman crime syndicate. She just hid it behind charity galas and country club memberships. Martinez added, we also found something interesting in Marcus's boxes of documents. Seems he kept records of every time his parents asked him to forge signatures, backdate documents, or lie to investigators. He says it's insurance in case they ever turned on him. Smart of him, I admitted grudgingly. Not smart enough to avoid federal prison, Martinez said. But his cooperation is helping. We arrested 6 more people this morning based on his information, including 2 bank managers who helped hide the stolen funds. The scale of it overwhelmed me. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a network of corruption spanning decades, destroying families for profit. There's something else, Brennan said carefully. The FBI wants you to go public, a press conference telling your story. It might encourage other victims to come forward. I thought of Rebecca Valdez, still unaware she was living a lie, of how many others might be out there raised by the people who'd murdered their real parents. When Tomorrow, if you're ready, we'll control the narrative, present the facts carefully. But Emma, once this goes public, there's no going back. Your story will be everywhere. That evening, I stood in my condo, the one the Mitchells had tried to steal, and practiced what I would say. The DNA results had come back that afternoon, confirming what we already knew. I was Emma Louise Thornton. The Mitchells had murdered my parents when I was 2, stolen me, and raised me while draining my inheritance. My phone rang, Jennifer calling with updates from the Portland safety deposit box. Emma, you're not going to believe what your mother left. Photos of you as a baby, your parents' wedding album, love letters between them, but also recordings. She'd been taping phone conversations with Grace Mitchell. What's on them? Grace asking invasive questions about your parents' finances, their travel schedules, whether they had life insurance. This was months before the accident. Your mother knew Grace was a threat. Poor Louise. She'd seen the danger but hadn't been able to stop it. I wondered if she'd ever imagined Grace would go as far as murder. There's also a letter addressed to you, Jennifer continued, sealed marked to be opened on your 18th birthday. Should I overnight it? Please. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, I'd stand before cameras and tell the world that Bernadette Mitchell was a fiction, that my entire life had been built on the murders of David and Louise Thornton, that the people who'd raised me had spent 30 years planning to kill me too. But more importantly, I'd be asking a question. How many more of us are out there? How many stolen children raised by murderers, never knowing the truth? The Mitchells had created a victim when they killed my parents and stole me. They'd made a fatal error when they tried to kill me too. Because now I wasn't just Emma Thornton survivor. I was Emma Thornton fighter. And I was about to bring their entire world crashing down. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you're starting. Some secrets should stay buried. Walk away while you can. I screenshot it and forwarded it to Agent Kim. Then I typed back, the truth doesn't stay buried. See you at the press conference. Whatever shadows were still out there, whatever co-conspirators were scrambling to cover their tracks, they were about to learn what the Mitchells had discovered. I don't stay down. I don't stay quiet. And I definitely don't walk away. Tomorrow the world would meet Emma Thornton, and the adoption ring that had operated in darkness for 3 decades would finally face the light. The FBI field office's press room was packed beyond capacity. Local news, national correspondents, true crime podcasters, and newspaper journalists crammed into every available space. I sat at the long table facing them, flanked by Agent Kim, Ada Winters, and David Brennan. My hands didn't shake as I adjusted the microphone. The Mitchells had raised me to be poised under pressure, though they'd never intended for me to use that skill against them. Good morning. I began, my voice steady. My name is Emma Louise Thornton, though until 2 weeks ago I believed I was Bernadette Mitchell. I'm here to tell you about a 30-year conspiracy of murder, kidnapping, and fraud that has destroyed multiple families across the Pacific Northwest. The room erupted with camera flashes and questions. Agent Kim raised her hand for silence. I continued. When I was 2 years old, my parents, David and Louise Thornton, were murdered in a staged car accident. I was kidnapped from the hospital and sold to Grace and Harold Mitchell for $200,000. They raised me as their daughter while systematically stealing my inheritance, which should have been worth $30 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I pushed forward, voice growing stronger. 2 weeks ago, when I refused to give my adoptive brother my legally purchased condo, Grace Mitchell attempted to murder me with a champagne bottle. This assault captured on video led to the unraveling of their crimes. But the Mitchells aren't unique. We've identified at least 11 other families who purchased kidnapped children through the same network. I held up the photographs Brennan had shown me. These are just some of the stolen children. We're asking anyone who was privately adopted in the Pacific Northwest between 1990 and 1995 to contact the FBI. You may be a victim without knowing it. The questions came fast and fierce. How did they hide this for so long? Bribes, forged documents, and murdered witnesses, Agent Kim answered. We've arrested 17 people so far, including judges, social workers, and bank officials. What about the other children? We're reaching out to all potential victims, ADA Winters said. Some may choose to maintain their current lives, but they deserve to know the truth. Miss Thornton, how do you feel about the people who raised you? I'd prepared for this question, but it still hit hard. The Mitchells stole everything from me. My parents, my identity, my inheritance. They plotted my murder for insurance money. But they also taught me to be strong, to work hard, to never give up. I'm using those skills to ensure they face justice. What about your biological brother, Marcus? He's cooperating with authorities and will serve time for his role in the fraud. I hope he uses that time to become a better person. The press conference continued for an hour. By the time it ended, my story was trending worldwide. Social media exploded with hashtags like stolen children and Hans Okans justice for Emma. But the real bombshell came that afternoon. I was back in my condo fielding calls from reporters when Agent Kim called. Emma, you need to see the news. Channel 7. I turned on the television to see a breaking news banner, Mitchell Charity Foundation exposed as 30-year fraud scheme. The reporter stood outside the Bellevue Country Club. Shocking revelations continue in the Emma Thornton case. We've learned the prestigious Mitchell Foundation, which has raised millions for supposed children's charities, over 3 decades never donated a cent to legitimate causes. Instead, the money funded the Mitchell family's lavish lifestyle and covered their mounting debts. The screen showed photos from charity galas I remembered attending, Grace in designer gowns, Harold glad-handing donors. All those wealthy people believing they were helping children, never knowing they were funding the family that had stolen children. Former donors are already filing lawsuits, the reporter continued. Margaret Ashford, who donated $500,000 over 20 years, had this to say. The screen cut to an elderly woman in Pearl's fury etched on her face. Grace Mitchell sat on my charity board. She cried actual tears talking about helping orphans. To know she was stealing from orphans, murdering their parents. I want every cent back with interest. My phone rang. Brennan. Emma, the floodgates have opened. 16 more victims have come forward in the last hour. 3 are confirmed through DNA testing as children who supposedly died in accidents. Their parents were murdered, their deaths faked, and they were sold to wealthy families. 16 more. And climbing. One woman in California just discovered she's the heiress to a hotel chain. She thought her parents were migrant workers who died in a fire. Turns out they owned half of Napa Valley. The scope kept expanding. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about dozens, possibly hundreds of stolen lives. That evening, something unexpected happened. Marcus called from the Federal Detention Center. Emma, he said, using my real name for the first time. I know you hate me. You should. But I need you to know something. I'm listening. I found more files, hidden ones. Mom, Grace, she kept records of everything. Names, dates, amounts. She was blackmailing some of the other families, threatening to expose their adopted children weren't legally obtained. Why are you telling me this? Because there's a storage unit. I'll give you the location and key code. Everything's there, including, he paused, including photos of your real parents, videos of you as a baby with them. She kept them as trophies. My throat closed. Videos of my parents. The parents I couldn't remember. Why keep that I managed? She liked to watch them sometimes. Said it reminded her that anyone could be brought down if you were smart enough. She's evil Emma. I see that now. I spent my whole life trying to earn her approval, never realizing she wasn't capable of real love. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, processing everything. The storage unit would be raided tomorrow, its contents cataloged as evidence. But those videos, those photos, they would eventually be mine. Fragments of a life stolen, but not entirely erased. My laptop pinged with news alerts. The Mitchell scandal had gone international. Forbes was running a feature on the stolen heirs. Netflix had already announced a documentary. Everyone wanted to tell the story of the children sold to their parents' killers. But the biggest shock came in the morning paper. Below the fold, a small article. Stephanie Huang arrested at Canadian border. Marcus's mysterious fiancée had been caught trying to flee with $2 million in cash and diamonds. She'd been more than a paralegal. She'd been Grace's protégée, learning the art of the grift, planning to start her own version of the scheme in Vancouver. The Mitchell crime family was falling apart, but its poisonous influence had spread wider than anyone imagined. Each arrest led to new revelations, new victims, new horrors, but also new hope. Rebecca Valdez had seen the news and called the FBI. Her adoptive parents had confessed everything, begging her forgiveness. Michael Chen had won his court case, reclaiming his inheritance and his name. Others were coming forward, supporting each other, building a community of survivors. Standing at my window, looking out at the water view, the Mitchells had tried to kill me for I thought about Louise and David Thornton. My parents, who'd loved me for 2 precious years before Grace's greed tore us apart. They'd never gotten to see me grow up, succeed, survive. But their daughter had survived. Their daughter was fighting back. And their daughter was winning. The Mitchells had thought they were creating a victim. Instead, they'd forged a warrior. And I was just getting started. The federal detention center smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. I sat in the visiting room watching guards escort Grace Mitchell to the reinforced glass partition. Orange didn't suit her. Neither did the harsh fluorescent lighting that revealed every line of bitterness etched into her face. She settled into the plastic chair with the remains of her old hauteur chin lifted despite the shackles. For 30 seconds we stared at each other through the scratched barrier. The woman who'd raised me, the woman who'd murdered my parents, the woman who'd tried to murder me. "Hello, Grace," I said, finally deliberately omitting any familial title. Her lips twisted. "Come to gloat, Emma, to see how far the mighty have fallen." "I came for answers. You owe me that much." "I owe you nothing." But something flickered in her eyes. Fear, regret. "You destroyed everything. My reputation, my family, my life's work. Your life's work was built on the bodies of innocent people. My parents. The other children's parents. How many, Grace? How many did you kill?" She leaned back, studying me with the calculating look I remembered from childhood. "Does it matter? They're dead. You're alive, though that wasn't supposed to last much longer. Tell me about the soup." Her facade cracked slightly. "What soup?" "The homemade soup you brought me in the hospital. The one with enough arsenic to kill a horse. Did you really think you'd get away with poisoning me in a building full of medical professionals? It would have worked if that stupid roommate hadn't interfered." The words came out before she could stop them. Her lawyer would have been appalled. "So you admit it. First the champagne bottle, then the poison. How many other ways did you plan to kill me?" Grace's composure finally shattered. "You want to know the truth, fine. You were never supposed to live past 30. The plan was always to wait until you'd built up enough assets, then arrange an accident. But you just kept succeeding, kept growing your wealth. 200,000 turned into a condo worth 700,000. Do you know how much debt Marcus accumulated while you were playing tech princess? That's not my fault." "Isn't it?" She leaned forward, eyes wild. "You had everything. Intelligence, drive, success. Everything I tried to beat out of you just made you stronger. While Marcus, my real son, my blood struggled with everything. It wasn't fair. Fair you murdered my parents when I was 2 years old. You stole my life, my name, my inheritance. And you talked to me about fair. Your parents were weak, rich brats who inherited everything and contributed nothing. We worked for what we had. We deserved that money more than some trust fund baby. So you killed them." "Harold killed them. I just facilitated. Suggested the location, the method. He was always good with cars." She smiled, a terrible expression. "They never saw it coming. too busy cooing over you in the back seat to notice the truck until it was too late. My stomach churned, but I kept my face neutral. This was being recorded. Every word was evidence. And then you took me from the hospital. Castellano handled that part. Brilliant man, no conscience whatsoever. He had nurses on his payroll documents ready to go. You disappeared from one system and appeared in another clean as could be. Bernadette Mitchell, beloved adopted daughter. Beloved? I couldn't hide my disbelief. At first, yes. You were such a beautiful child. Everyone commented on it. I thought I could love you like my own. But then you started looking exactly like her. Louise. That same stubborn chin, those eyes that saw too much. Every day you grew more like the woman I'd eliminated, and I realized what a mistake I'd made. So you tried to break me. I tried to make you useful, obedient, grateful. Instead, you became everything Marcus should have been. Do you know how infuriating it was, watching you excel while my actual child failed? You were supposed to be the servant, not the star. Is that why you told him about the forged deed, gave him hope he could take what I'd earned? He deserved something from you, some compensation for how you'd overshadowed him all these years. Grace's chains rattled as she gestured. That condo should have been his, would have been if you'd just played along. Like the 10 other children whose families you destroyed, did they play along? Her face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Jonathan Whitman died in a skiing accident that you arranged. Patricia Morse confessed to providing the drugs that caused his heart to stop on that mountain. Grace shrugged. Skiing is dangerous. Anna Rodriguez fell from her apartment balcony at 21. Her adoptive parents inherited $3 million. People fall. Should I continue because I have the whole list? Every murder you facilitated, every life you ended for money. Castellano kept impeccable records. Castellano is dead. His records aren't. Neither is his secretary, who's been very chatty with the FBI. She has recordings, Grace, of you ordering hits, discussing payment, laughing about grieving families. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face. That's impossible. I was always careful. Not careful enough. You got arrogant, sloppy. Thought your money and connections would always protect you. But here's the thing about killing parents and stealing their children. Eventually, one of those children grows up and fights back. You think you've won? Grace leaned forward, pressing against the glass. You have no idea what you've started. There are others out there, people with more to lose than me. They'll come for you. Let them come. I'm not a scared 2-year-old anymore. I'm Emma Thornton, and I have my parents' fortune, the FBI's protection, and the truth on my side. The truth, she laughed bitterly. You want more truth. Your precious parents weren't saints. David was investigating our charity, threatening to expose some creative accounting. They were going to ruin us over a few $1,000s in misallocated funds. We had to act. So you murdered them for trying to expose your fraud. How is that better? It's practical. Something you learned from me, whether you admit it or not. That ruthless streak that made you successful, that came from being raised by Wolf's little girl. We made you who you are. No. I stood preparing to leave. Louise and David Thornton made me who I am. Their love in those first 2 years, their legacy, their blood. You tried to destroy that, but you failed. All you did was teach me how to recognize evil and fight it. Emma, Grace called as I turned away. When they give me the death penalty, will you come watch? I paused at the door. No, you'll die alone, forgotten, while the children you orphaned use their reclaimed inheritances to help others. Your legacy will be nothing but a cautionary tale about greed and cruelty. The last thing I heard was her screaming, wordless rage echoing off concrete walls. The guard at the desk looked concerned. You okay, miss? That sounded rough. I'm perfect, I said, meaning it. She can't hurt anyone anymore. Outside, Agent Kim waited by a black SUV. Did you get what you needed? She confessed to facilitating my parents' murder and poisoning me in the hospital. It's all on tape. That's huge. With her confession and Harold's testimony, she's looking at multiple life sentences, maybe even federal death penalty. As we drove away, I thought about Grace's claim that she'd made me who I was. There was a grain of truth there. Her cruelty had forged my strength. Her greed had taught me the value of honest work. Her hatred had shown me the importance of choosing love. But she was wrong about one thing. I wasn't who I was because of her. I was who I was in spite of her, and that made all the difference. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Watched Mom on the jail cam. Thank you for facing her. I couldn't have done it. Maybe there was hope for him after all. Prison had a way of clarifying what really mattered. For Marcus, that seemed to be finally seeing Grace for the monster she was and choosing to be better. The war wasn't over. Grace's warning about others coming for me was probably true, but I'd faced the woman who'd haunted my nightmares for 30 years and walked away stronger. Whatever came next, I was ready. The Washington State Federal Courthouse buzzed with activity as the most complex criminal case in Pacific Northwest history prepared for trial. I sat in a secure conference room with the prosecution team, surrounded by evidence boxes that told the story of 30 years of murder, fraud, and stolen lives. "We have a problem," Ada Winters announced, entering with a grim expression. "Harold Mitchell attempted suicide in his cell last night." My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. "Is he alive, under psychiatric watch? But his lawyer is arguing he's mentally incompetent to stand trial." She dropped a stack of papers on the table. "However, we have good news too. Stephanie Huang wants to make a deal." Agent Kim pulled up a video on her laptop. She's offered full testimony about the Mitchell operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Watch this. The screen showed Stephanie in an interrogation room, her previous polish replaced by desperation. "I have recordings," she was saying. "Grace trained me personally. She taught me how to forge documents, how to identify vulnerable targets, how to make murders look accidental. I recorded everything as insurance." "How many recordings?" the interrogator asked. "Dozens, including her discussing Emma Thornton's parents planning the hospital poisoning and..." Stephanie paused. "And coordinating with other families in the network. The Mitchells weren't working alone." My hands clenched. "She has Grace on tape planning my parents' murder." "Not the original murder," Agent Kim clarified, "but discussing it after the fact, including details only the killer would know. Combined with Harold's confession, it's damning." David Brennan spread crime scene photos across the table. "We need to prepare you for what's coming, Emma. The defense will try to destroy your credibility, paint you as a bitter daughter seeking revenge. They'll bring up every mistake you've ever made. What mistakes I've lived like a nun trying to earn their approval." "That's the point. They'll have to invent controversies. Claim you were difficult, ungrateful, possibly violent. Grace has already filed a countersuit claiming you assaulted her at the party. She hit me with a champagne bottle. On video, thankfully, but be prepared for character assassination. It's their only strategy." Over the following weeks, I worked with the prosecution team to build an unshakable case. We had financial records showing systematic theft from my trust fund, medical records proving the insurance physical was fraudulent, testimony from 19 other stolen children, now adults who discovered their true identities. The most powerful evidence came from Marcus's storage unit. Along with the promised photos and videos of my parents, Grace had kept detailed journals. Like a serial killer collecting trophies, she documented every crime, every success, every moment of my suffering. One entry dated on my 16th birthday read, "Emma scored perfect on her SATs. If she wasn't so useful for maintaining our charity reputation, I'd have dealt with her years ago. Perhaps a car accident like her parents. Poetic justice." Reading those words in her precise handwriting made my skin crawl. She'd been planning my death for half my life. The videos of my parents were harder to process. David Thornton reading me bedtime stories, his voice warm and patient. Louise singing lullabies, kissing my forehead, telling me she loved me to the moon and back. 2 years of perfect love before Grace's greed destroyed everything. "We'll play these for the jury," ADA Winters said softly. "They need to see what was stolen from you." 3 days before the trial, another breakthrough. The FBI arrested Dr. Patricia Morse's former partner, Dr. James Caldwell. He'd helped fake medical records for 8 of the stolen children and was eager to testify in exchange for leniency. "Grace Mitchell ran the tightest criminal organization I've ever seen," he told investigators. "She had judges, cops, social workers, doctors, all on payroll. If someone threatened to talk, they had accidents. I kept quiet for 20 years out of pure fear." His testimony revealed 12 more murders we hadn't connected to the adoption ring. Witnesses who'd asked too many questions, a nurse who'd grown a conscience, a private investigator who'd gotten too close to the truth. "The body count keeps rising," Agent Kim said during our final pre-trial meeting. "We're now looking at 26 confirmed murders over 3 decades. The Mitchells make most serial killers look amateur." The night before opening statements, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow I'd face Grace again, this time in a courtroom packed with media and other victims. The woman who'd raised me, tortured me, tried to kill me, would finally face justice. My phone rang at 3 a.m. Jennifer. "Emma, I'm sorry to call so late, but you need to know. Rebecca Valdez was attacked tonight. Someone tried to push her in front of a subway train in San Francisco." My blood froze. "Is she okay?" Shaken but unharmed. A bystander grabbed her just in time. But Emma the attacker had a list, names and addresses of all the stolen children testifying. Grace's warning echoed in my mind. There are others out there, people with more to lose than me. "The FBI is increasing security for all witnesses," Jennifer continued. "You'll have a full protective detail at the trial, but be careful. This isn't over." I stood at my window watching the city lights reflect on the water. Somewhere out there, the remaining members of the adoption ring were scrambling desperate to silence witnesses before they could testify. They'd already tried to kill Rebecca. Who was next? But as dawn broke over Seattle, I felt no fear, only determination. They'd stolen our parents, our identities, our inheritances. They'd murdered and manipulated for 30 years. But their reign was ending, and we were the ones ending it. Grace Mitchell thought she'd raised a victim. Instead, she'd created her own downfall, and in a few hours, the whole world would watch it happen. The war crimes trial of the century was about to begin, and I was ready to testify. The federal courthouse steps swarmed with media as our convoy of black SUVs arrived. FBI agents formed a human corridor shields raised against the crushing press of reporters shouting questions. I kept my eyes forward, flanked by Agent Kim and 2 additional bodyguards. Inside, Courtroom 7 had been transformed into a fortress. Metal detectors, armed guards, bulletproof glass partitions for the defendants. The gallery was packed with victims' families, journalists, and curiosity seekers who'd won the lottery for public seats. Grace and Harold Mitchell sat at separate defense tables, their legal teams having successfully argued for severed trials. Grace wore a conservative black suit, her hair professionally styled, looking every inch the wronged society matron. Harold appeared to have aged 20 years, his hands shaking as he avoided eye contact with everyone. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Yamamoto presiding. Judge Yamamoto, known for her no-nonsense approach to complex cases, took her seat. "Before we begin, I want to address the media circus outside. This is a court of law, not entertainment. I will have order or I will clear the gallery." Ada Winters stood for opening statements. "Your Honor, the prosecution will prove that Grace and Harold Mitchell orchestrated a 30-year criminal enterprise that resulted in 26 murders, 15 kidnappings, and the theft of over $100 million. They didn't just kill parents to steal their children. They built an empire on the bodies of innocent families." The defense attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Stockton, who'd defended mob bosses, rose next. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Grace Mitchell is a respected philanthropist who adopted a troubled child out of compassion. That child, Emma Thornton, has concocted an elaborate fantasy to explain her own failures and justify stealing from the people who raised her. I forced myself to remain expressionless. We'd prepared for this narrative. The first week of testimony established the financial crimes. Forensic accountants walked the jury through 30 years of embezzlement, money laundering, and fraud. Charts showed how my parents' fortune had been systematically drained, funneled through shell companies and fake charities. Then came the witnesses. Michael Chen took the stand first, describing how he'd discovered his true identity only after his adoptive mother's deathbed confession. Rebecca Valdez testified via video link still shaken from the attempt on her life. One by one, 19 stolen children told their stories. But the most dramatic moment came when Stephanie Huang took the stand. State your name for the record. Stephanie Huang. I was engaged to Marcus Mitchell and trained by Grace Mitchell in what she called the family business. What was the family business? Murder, kidnapping, and fraud disguised as private adoption services. Stockton objected repeatedly, but Judge Yamamoto allowed the testimony. Stephanie produced recordings from her phone, Grace's voice clear and unmistakable. The key is patience, Grace said on one recording. You identify the targets, study their routines, wait for the perfect moment. Emma's parents were easy. They were so predictable, same route every night. Harold just had to time it right. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as recording after recording played. Grace discussing poison dosages, laughing about grieving families, planning my death with the casual tone of someone organizing a dinner party. Why did you record these conversations? Ada Winters asked. Insurance. Grace taught me to always have leverage. I knew if things went bad, she'd throw me under the bus. The recordings were my protection. Did Grace Mitchell ever express remorse for her crimes? Never. She said weak people deserved to be exploited, that if parents couldn't protect their children, they didn't deserve to have them. When my turn came to testify, I wore my mother's pearl necklace recovered from the safety deposit box. Louise Thornton's presence gave me strength as I swore to tell the truth. Please state your name for the record. Emma Louise Thornton, formerly known as Bernadette Mitchell. For 3 hours, I walked the jury through my life. The childhood of conditional love always second to Marcus, the discovery of the forged deed, the confrontation at the party, waking up in the hospital to learn my entire life was built on lies. How did you feel when you learned the Mitchells had murdered your parents? Destroyed, then angry, then determined to get justice not just for me but for all the families they'd destroyed. Stockton's cross-examination was brutal. Isn't it true you were a difficult child, defiant, ungrateful? I was a child who worked constantly for approval that never came. I wasn't difficult. I was surviving. You claim Grace Mitchell tried to poison you in the hospital. Do you have any proof besides your word? The arsenic found in the soup she brought me. The security footage of her entering my room. Her confession to me at the detention center, which was recorded. Ah, yes, the jailhouse visit. Tell me, Miss Thornton, or should I say Miss Mitchell, how much money do you stand to inherit if Grace Mitchell is convicted? I don't want their money. I want justice for my murdered parents. But you will inherit, won't you? The civil suits alone could net you millions. Any money recovered will go to a foundation for the other victims. I have my parents' inheritance. I don't need blood money. The breaking point came on day 12. Harold Mitchell, against his lawyer's advice, decided to testify. Whether from guilt fear or a desperate bid for leniency, he took the stand. Mr. Mitchell. His own attorney began carefully. Tell us about the night of March 20th, 32 years ago. Harold's voice came out as barely a whisper. Grace had been planning it for months. She knew the Thorntons' routine, knew that curve had no guardrails. I was supposed to just tap their bumper, make them swerve, damage the car. But what Mr. Mitchell? But Grace had tampered with my truck. Weighted the front, reinforced the bumper. When I hit them, it wasn't a tap. It was like hitting them with a battering ram. Their car went straight over the cliff. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Even Grace's carefully controlled expression cracked. "I wanted to call for help," Harold continued, tears streaming. But Grace was there in seconds. She'd followed in another car. She looked over the edge, saw they were still alive, and she made me leave them, said it was cleaner this way. What about the child, Emma? Grace had that all arranged. The hospital, the false documents. She'd paid off a nurse to declare the baby died with her parents, then hand her over to us. It was all so organized, so cold. Like she'd done it before. Had she done it before? Harold's sob echoed through the courtroom. Yes, God help me, yes. At least 6 times before the Thorntons. Maybe more. She called it harvesting. Like those children were crops to be collected. The defense table erupted. Stockton objected frantically while Grace hissed at Harold to shut up. But the dam had broken. Harold confessed to everything. Every murder, every kidnapping, every forged document. By the time he finished, several jurors were in tears. Judge Yamamoto called a recess. In the hallway, victims' families embraced finally having answers to decades-old questions. I stood apart processing Harold's testimony. My parents had been alive after the crash. They might have survived if not for Grace's cold calculation. When court reconvened, Stockton made a desperate play. Your Honor, given Mr. Mitchell's obvious mental breakdown, I move for a mistrial. Motion denied. The witness appeared competent and responsive. Continue, counselor. But there was nowhere to continue to. The case was effectively over. Harold's confession combined with Stephanie's recordings and the mountain of physical evidence left no room for doubt. 2 days later, closing arguments felt almost anticlimactic. Ada Winters methodically laid out 30 years of crimes, while Stockton half-heartedly argued for reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. On the count of murder in the first degree of David Thornton, we find the defendant, Grace Mitchell, guilty. On the count of murder in the first degree of Louise Thornton, we find the defendant guilty. The verdicts continued for 20 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Murder, kidnapping, fraud, attempted murder conspiracy. Grace Mitchell would never see freedom again. She turned to stare at me as the guards prepared to lead her away. No remorse, no fear, just cold hatred. This isn't over, she mouthed. But it was. For her, at least, it was finally over. 3 weeks after Grace's conviction, the federal courthouse reconvened for sentencing. The building bristled with even tighter security following 2 attempts on witnesses' lives, both thwarted by FBI intervention. I sat in the front row of the gallery surrounded by fellow survivors who'd become an unexpected family bound by shared trauma. Judge Yamamoto entered with a thick folder, her expression grave. Before we proceed with sentencing, the court has received additional evidence that requires addressing. Ada Winters stood. Your Honor, based on information provided by Marcus Mitchell, we've uncovered evidence of 12 additional murders across Washington, Oregon, and California. The victims were biological relatives of stolen children who asked too many questions. The gallery erupted in whispers, 12 more families destroyed. Furthermore, Winters continued, we've arrested 8 more conspirators, including 2 sitting judges and a state senator. The Mitchell crime network was more extensive than anyone imagined. Grace sat unmoved at the defense table, her orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to her former elegance. Harold at a separate table seemed to shrink with each revelation. We'll proceed with sentencing based on current convictions, Judge Yamamoto decided. Additional charges can be filed separately. Grace Mitchell, please rise. Grace stood with the same imperious posture she'd used at charity galas chin high, refusing to show weakness. Grace Mitchell, you have been convicted of 26 counts of murder in the first degree, 15 counts of kidnapping, 37 counts of fraud exceeding $10 million, and conspiracy to commit murder for hire. The depravity of your crimes is almost beyond comprehension. You didn't just murder parents and steal their children. You raised those children while systematically destroying their inheritances and planning their eventual deaths. The judge's voice hardened. You showed no mercy to your victims, and this court shows none to you. For the murders of David and Louise Thornton, I sentence you to death by lethal injection." A collective gasp filled the room. Washington state rarely imposed capital punishment. For the remaining murders, consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. For the kidnapping and fraud charges, an additional 900 years. You will never again walk free among decent people. Grace's composure finally cracked. "You can't do this. I'm a philanthropist. I've helped hundreds of children." "You've destroyed hundreds of children," Judge Yamamoto corrected. "Remove the defendant." As guards dragged Grace away, she screamed obscenities. Her mask of refinement finally shattered completely. The woman who'd terrorized families for 3 decades was reduced to incoherent rage. "Harold Mitchell, please rise." Harold stood on shaking legs, supported by his attorney. "Mr. Mitchell, your cooperation has been noted. However, it does not erase your willing participation in these crimes. For the murders of David and Louise Thornton, I sentence you to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. For the remaining charges, an additional 60 years to be served concurrently." Harold collapsed back into his chair, sobbing. At 71, 40 years meant he'd die in prison. But it was more mercy than he'd shown my parents on that cliff 32 years ago. Marcus's sentencing came next. He'd been transferred from federal custody looking gaunt but clear-eyed. Prison had stripped away his boyish charm, leaving something rawer, more honest. "Marcus Mitchell, your cooperation has been invaluable in exposing this criminal network. You've provided evidence leading to dozens of arrests and the recovery of millions in stolen funds. However, you actively participated in fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder." Marcus nodded, accepting responsibility in a way I'd never seen before. "Taking into account your cooperation and genuine remorse, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison with possibility of early release after 5 years conditional on continued cooperation. Additionally, you're ordered to pay restitution of $2 million to the Victims Fund." "I understand, Your Honor," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry, Emma, for everything." It was the first time he'd apologized without expecting something in return. The individual trials of other conspirators would continue for months, but the main event was over. As we filed out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed, wanting reactions, quotes, tears. But I had somewhere more important to be. Pine Grove Cemetery sat on a hill overlooking Puget Sound. For the first time in 30 years, I stood at my parents' graves. David and Louise Thornton, beloved parents taken too soon. Fresh flowers covered the restored headstones placed by strangers who'd heard our story and wanted to pay respects. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." The words felt strange but right. "I'm Emma, your daughter. I'm so sorry it took me this long to find you." I told them everything. About the life stolen from us, the years with the Mitchells, the fight for justice. About the foundation I was creating with the recovered funds to help other stolen children find their identities. About the good that would come from their sacrifice. "Grace is going to die for what she did to you," I said finally. "It doesn't bring you back, but maybe you can rest easier, knowing she'll never hurt another family." Other survivors joined me. Michael Chen at his parents' graves in California via video call. Rebecca Valdez at a memorial she'd created since her parents' bodies were never found. We were connected across distances, united in grief and determination. That evening back in my condo, I opened a package from Marcus. Inside was a USB drive and a letter in his shaky handwriting. "Emma, I found these hidden in Mom's personal safe. Videos she took of you during those first months after they brought you home, before she started hating you. I thought you should have them. Maybe there was a moment, however brief, when we were a real family. I'm sorry I wasn't the brother you deserved. Marcus." I plugged in the drive with trembling hands. The first video showed a much younger Grace holding toddler me, actually smiling as I played with blocks. Harold in the background helping baby Marcus walk. For just a moment we looked normal, happy even. But I could see it in Grace's eyes even then. The calculation. The coldness underneath the performance. She was already planning how to use me, already seeing dollar signs instead of a daughter. I closed the laptop and walked to my window. The sun was setting over Elliott Bay, painting the water gold. Somewhere out there, more conspirators were being arrested. More stolen children were learning their true identities. More families were finding closure. The Mitchells had thought they were building a criminal empire. Instead, they'd created an army of survivors determined to seek justice. Grace would die alone in a concrete cell, while we would live surrounded by chosen family, bonded by truth, stronger than blood. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Kim. Just arrested the last known member of the network. It's over, Emma. It's finally over. But it wasn't over, not really. The healing would take years. The legal battles would continue. The search for more victims might never end. But the reign of terror was finished. The monsters who'd stolen children and murdered parents would never hurt another family. I raised a glass of wine to the window, toasting the parents I'd never really known but would always love. We won, Mom and Dad. We won. Tomorrow I'd start the work of building something good from the ashes of tragedy. The Emma Louise Thornton Foundation would ensure no stolen child remained lost. But tonight I simply stood in the home they'd tried to steal from me and felt something I hadn't experienced in 32 years. Peace. 6 months after the trial, the Emma Louise Thornton Foundation opened its doors in a restored Victorian mansion in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. The building, purchased with recovered funds from the Mitchell crime network, buzzed with activity as counselors, investigators, and advocates prepared to help families torn apart by illegal adoptions. We have 17 active cases already, Jennifer informed me as we walked through the freshly painted halls. She'd left her law firm to become the foundation's legal director. 3 confirmed illegal adoptions in Idaho, 2 in Montana, and the rest scattered across the West Coast. In the conference room, Michael Chen led a support group for adult stolen children. Through the glass door, I could see 8 people sharing stories, tissues, passing hand to hand. Rebecca Valdez participated via video screen from San Francisco, where she was establishing a sister branch of the foundation. The ripples keep spreading, I said. Every case we solve leads to 2 more. My phone rang. Agent Kim, now our liaison with federal law enforcement. Emma, we have a situation. There's a woman in Portland claiming her daughter was stolen 25 years ago. The details match our pattern, but there's a complication. The child was raised by a police chief who's now a state representative. Send me the file. We'll handle it carefully. This was the hardest part, telling successful, seemingly happy adults that their entire lives were built on murdered parents. Not everyone wanted to know the truth. Some preferred the lie. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Sarah Winters, a psychiatrist specializing in identity trauma who'd joined our team. How are you doing, Emma, really? I'd been seeing her since the trial ended, working through 32 years of complex trauma. Better. The nightmares are less frequent. I can look at photos of Grace without panicking. And the guilt, still there. All those years I tried so hard to earn their love, not knowing they'd killed my parents. Sometimes I feel like I betrayed David and Louise by calling their murderers Mom and Dad. You were a child. You survived the only way you could. Dr. Winters leaned forward. Have you given more thought to the letter? The letter. Marcus had been writing from federal prison, where he'd become a model inmate teaching literacy to other prisoners and working with the FBI to uncover more crimes. He wanted to apologize in person to try building some kind of relationship. I'm not ready, I admitted. Maybe someday, but not yet. That's perfectly valid. Healing happens on your timeline, not anyone else's. That evening, I returned to my condo to find an unexpected visitor. Harold's sister, Catherine, waited in the lobby. I'd met her once at a family Christmas when I was 12. She'd seemed kind but distant, clearly uncomfortable with the Mitchell family dynamics. Emma, I'm sorry to ambush you. I have something you need to see. We sat in my living room as she pulled out a worn journal. This was my mother's, Harold's mother. She died when he was 19, right before he met Grace. I opened the journal carefully. The entries painted a picture of a gentle young man who loved poetry and wanted to be a teacher. Then Grace appeared in the narrative, and everything changed. She targeted him, Catherine said quietly. Harold had inherited a small amount from our parents. Grace saw an opportunity. She was already running small cons, needed a partner with a clean reputation. My brother never stood a chance against her manipulation. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, it doesn't. Harold made his choices. But I wanted you to know he wasn't always a monster. Grace created that. She had a gift for finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them until they became someone else entirely. After Catherine left, I sat with the journal reading about a young Harold who'd written love poems and volunteered at animal shelters. Grace had taken that gentle soul and twisted it into someone capable of murder. The ultimate long con stealing, not just money, but humanity itself. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but this time not threatening. Ms. Thornton, my name is Amy Patterson. I think I might be one of the stolen children. My adoptive mother just confessed on her deathbed. Can we meet? Another family about to learn the truth. Another life about to shatter and hopefully rebuild. I forwarded the message to our intake team, then called Michael Chen. We have a new case. Can you take the initial meeting? Of course. Emma, did you see the news they're making a documentary about us? Netflix wants to interview all the survivors. What did you tell them? That our stories aren't entertainment. If they want to document this, they need to focus on prevention and justice, not sensationalism. Good answer. Michael had become something like a brother to me, the kind Marcus should have been. We understood each other in ways no one else could. Both raised by our parents' killers, both fighting to reclaim identities stolen before we could speak. Later that night, I stood in my kitchen making dinner when grief hit me unexpectedly. It happened sometimes, the sudden realization that I was cooking a meal my real mother would have taught me, that David Thornton would have walked me down the aisle at a wedding, that they'd missed everything, first days of school graduations, heartbreaks, triumphs. The tears came hard and fast, but I'd learned not to fight them. Dr. Winters called it healing rain necessary for growth. I let myself mourn for the 1,000 moments stolen, the lifetime of love erased by greed. When the storm passed, I wiped my face and returned to cooking. Tomorrow, we'd help another stolen child find their truth. Next week, we'd testify before Congress about adoption law reform. Next month, we'd open foundation branches in California and Oregon. The Mitchells had tried to steal my life. They'd succeeded for 30 years. But Emma Thornton was finally living, not just surviving, and she was making sure no other child would suffer the same theft. My phone rang, Rebecca calling from San Francisco. Emma, I just wanted to say thank you for fighting when the rest of us didn't know we needed to, for building this foundation, for showing us we're not alone. We were never alone, I told her. We just didn't know where to find each other. As we talked, sharing updates and small victories, I felt the truth of those words. Grace Mitchell had created a community of survivors without meaning to. In trying to isolate and destroy us, she'd given us the most powerful gift of all, each other. 1 year after Grace Mitchell's death sentence was carried out, I stood before the graduation class of the University of Washington's School of Social Work. The auditorium was packed with future counselors, investigators, and advocates who would join the fight against family trafficking and illegal adoption networks. My name is Emma Louise Thornton. I began no longer stumbling over the words. Until 2 years ago, I believed I was someone else entirely. Today, I want to talk about identity resilience and the families we choose versus the families we're born into. In the front row sat the other survivors who'd become my chosen family. Michael Chen, now running our California operations. Rebecca Valdez, who'd just gotten engaged to a fellow survivor she'd met through our support groups. 17 others who'd discovered their true identities through our foundation's work. As I spoke about our journey from victims to advocates, my phone vibrated with a message from Agent Kim. Congressional bill passed. Mandatory DNA testing for all private adoptions. You did it. The Emma Louise Thornton Act would prevent future illegal adoptions through required genetic screening and stricter oversight. It had taken 18 months of lobbying testimony and public pressure, but we'd changed federal law. After my speech, a young woman approached hesitantly. "Miss Thornton, I think my little brother might be one of the stolen children. His adoptive parents have been acting strange since your story went public." I handed her my card. "Call our hotline. We'll help you find the truth safely." That afternoon, I drove to the federal correctional facility where Marcus was serving his final year. We'd been corresponding for months, slowly building something that might one day resemble a sibling relationship. Not the one we should have had, but the one possible, after everything that had happened. He looked healthier than I'd ever seen him. Prison had forced him to confront himself without Grace's poison or easy money to hide behind. He'd earned a paralegal certificate and was helping other inmates with their cases. "Emma," he said, sitting across the reinforced table, "thank you for coming." "How are you doing?" Learning who I am without her voice in my head. Dr. Patel says it's like deprogramming from a cult. Grace raised me to be her weapon, and I let her. He paused. "I've been working with the FBI on cold cases. Found 3 more murders she might have orchestrated." "That must be hard." "It's necessary. Every family deserves answers." He leaned forward. "I know I can't undo what I did, but when I get out, I want to help. The foundation, I mean. Not for forgiveness or redemption, just to be useful for once." "We'll see," I said carefully. "Trust takes time to rebuild." "I know. I'm willing to earn it." As I left the prison, I thought about second chances and the possibility of change. Marcus would never be the brother I should have had, but maybe he could become the man he should have been. That evening, the foundation hosted its first annual gala at the Seattle Art Museum. 300 supporters gathered to raise funds for our expanding operations. We'd helped reunite 43 stolen children with their biological families' legacies, recovered over $200 million in stolen assets, and put 78 criminals behind bars. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said from the podium wearing my mother Louise's emerald necklace, 2 years ago I discovered my entire life was a lie. Today I stand before you living my truth. We cannot change our pasts, but we can prevent others from suffering the same theft of identity and family. Catherine, my biological sister, who'd been sold to another family, joined me on stage. We'd found each other 6 months ago through DNA testing, 2 parts of a whole finally reunited. She'd been raised in Maine by a couple who genuinely believed they'd adopted legally, never knowing her origins. "Family is complicated," Catherine said, taking the microphone. "Sometimes it's blood, sometimes it's choice, sometimes it's the people who help you discover who you really are. Emma and I lost 29 years as sisters, but we're making up for lost time." The crowd erupted in applause as we announced the Foundation's latest initiative, free DNA testing, for anyone who suspected irregular adoption circumstances. In the first week alone, we'd had over 1,000 applications. Harold Mitchell had died in prison 4 months earlier, a heart attack in his cell. He'd left a final letter apologizing to all the families he'd helped destroy. Some found comfort in his remorse. Others, like me, filed it away as too little too late. Stephanie Huang was serving 15 years in federal prison, but had become our most valuable informant. Her detailed knowledge of the network's operations had led to arrests across 6 countries. Even behind bars, she was still trading information for reduced sentences, the ultimate survivor. After the gala, I returned to my condo, now filled with photos of both families. My birth parents, young and vibrant. Catherine and me making up for lost time. The chosen family of survivors who understood my journey. Even one recent photo of Marcus and me, awkward but trying. On my coffee table sat a letter I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment to open. It was from Grace Mitchell, written the day before her execution and delivered through her lawyer. Tonight felt like the right time. I poured a glass of wine and opened the envelope with steady hands. "Emma, by the time you read this, I'll be dead. Good. I'm tired of concrete and fluorescent lights. tired of pretending remorse I don't feel. You want to know the truth, I'm proud of what I built. 30 years of taking from the weak and giving to the strong. Your parents were sheep, all of them were. They deserved what they got for being careless with their treasures. My only regret is not killing you in that hospital. You were supposed to be nothing. Instead, you became everything Marcus couldn't be. The irony isn't lost on me. But here's what you don't understand. I made you. My cruelty forged your strength. My hatred taught you to fight. Without me, you'd have been another trust fund brat. Because of me, you're a warrior. So hate me. Celebrate my death. Build your little foundation. But remember, every victory you achieve, you owe to me. I'm in your blood now, whether you share my DNA or not. See you in hell, Grace. I read it twice, then carried it to my fireplace. The paper caught quickly, Grace's poison turning to ash and smoke. She was wrong about so much, but especially about this. She hadn't made me strong. She'd tried to break me. I'd made myself strong despite her. As the last of her words burned away, I thought about Louise and David Thornton, about the love they'd given me in those precious 2 years, about how that love had somehow survived 3 decades of abuse, buried deep but never extinguished. That's what Grace never understood. Love is stronger than hate. Truth is stronger than lies. And the human spirit, when it refuses to break, is stronger than any cruelty. My phone buzzed with messages from other survivors, sharing wins and struggles, supporting each other through the complex journey of reclaimed identity. Tomorrow we'd open 3 more foundation offices. Next month we'd testify at the United Nations about human trafficking through illegal adoption. But tonight I stood in the home they'd tried to steal and felt profound gratitude for survival, for justice, for the strange, painful, beautiful journey that had led me back to myself. Emma Louise Thornton, daughter of David and Louise, sister to Catherine, friend to fellow survivors, fighter for the lost and stolen. Finally, fully, completely myself. And ready for whatever came next. What would you do if you discovered your entire life was built on lies? Have you ever had to fight for your identity or stand up against powerful family members? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of survival and justice. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their fight for truth. Thank you for joining me on Emma's incredible journey. Remember, you are stronger than those who try to break you, and your truth deserves to be heard. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right and never let anyone steal your story.